In 2015, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff brought on Joaquim Levy as finance minister to address a fiscal deficit that had pushed 5%. A year later, Dr. Levy has already left, his fiscal reform incomplete. I visited him at his new World Bank offices, where he is now the CFO.
I think the world is in a crossroads. I mean, there are big questions in the world. The economy is changing. Also, some of the anti-cyclical policies taken in the aftermath of the big financial crisis of 2008, some are ending their course, and this, of course, changes the way the global economy is working. So one clear example of this is a sharp drop in the price of commodities, which has a repercussion throughout the globe. Brazil is in a crossroad because we have to deal with the end of the commodity prices. I think generally we use it wisely, but there are new challenges. And I think that for countries like Brazil and a few others, it just shows that it's a period where knowledge will be even more important. So you have to gear our economy to respond to this new environment. It's nothing terrible, but it's something that requires action. So to make our economy more responsive, more efficient, and with that, more productive.
And what kind of action specifically would you hope to see to prepare Brazil for this new era?
We have to reduce the red tape. We have to reduce all the cumbersome measures on companies. These involve, for instance, tax reforms. I think there is, in Brazil, indirect tax is very important. So we have to address the issue of indirect tax. The way it is today is extremely inefficient. It fosters an unhealthy tax competitions, and more than anything brings a lot of uncertainty to companies, because some of the actions taken by states in the area of VAT have been disputed by courts. So a company has to make an investment, sometimes it's offered an interesting deal, but it doesn't know if this deal will really be supported by courts or not. So how can I make a 20 years investment if I don't know what is my tax regime?
What is the more broader fiscal threat that you believe faces Brazil, and what is the importance of a deep-seated fiscal reform?
I think it's important because we're going to have, say, more buoyancy in taxes if people come back to invest. And to invest, you have to know the rules of the game. So this is why it's so important to vote some reforms, even if some of them you take, say, place gradually. But if you know the rule of the game, you can make decisions, you can invest. And this is the real way to grow. Right now we have seen, because of, say, questions related to the commodity markets, but and general growth, a real significant reduction in tax revenues. And why? Because people have reduced their investments. So we have to create an environment that brings confidence so that people come back to invest, and with that we get more tax revenues.
I think that generally there's a broad agreement of the importance of these fiscal reforms. Why has it been so difficult to put them into effect in Brazil?
Well, I think that fiscal reforms, the distance between broad agreement and effective reforms in most countries, there's some gap. They don't happen immediately, especially if you are not in an urgency, in a real crisis. But you have to continue to push for them. And I think that perhaps people don't realize the importance of getting more productive, that you only going to be able to, face and overcome poverty and so on if the economy becomes more efficient. It's not the government that you provide things for poverty alleviation. There's so much it can do because of the fiscal cost. So what you have to do is to make it easier for people to produce more.
Now you mentioned the private sector in Brazil. I think sometimes the private sector in Brazil can have a complicated reputation. We hear about the Costa Brazil and things along these lines. What is the state of the private sector, and what could be done to improve it?
I think that the private sector in Brazil is really what pushes the economy forward. So part of you mentioned the cost of Brazil. I think that part of the priority has to continue to be to reduce this cost. Is what I'm saying. You have to make life easier. A large part of Custo Brasil, for instance, when you look at the World Bank survey, it's really the cost of paying indirect taxes. So this is why we had put the improvement, the facilitation of the payment, the simplification of indirect taxes as a top priority. So if you're a big company, you're a nationwide company, you have a big tax advantage compared with local companies. Of course, this doesn't foster competition, and so that was also one reason to reform. Really, what we want is a level playing field for all companies in Brazil, foreign, domestic, small, big. Already Brazil has the advantage that we don't differentiate foreign and domestic companies, but also you have to have these level playing fields between big and small companies.
Is it difficult to get politicians who perhaps have a shorter time horizon to buy into a program of more longer term and gradual reform?
I think that some of these tax reforms, government last year, we were almost ready to get them passed. And I think that anytime things get more clear in Brazil, this will be really one of the priorities, because this is a relatively low-cost reform. Basically have only winners in this reform. There are very few losers in this reform. So it's really, I mean, you push the frontier upwards, you improve the economy without too much cost. Of course, a minimum focus from legislator is necessary, but I think any space, any room that you find, if it's something that should not bring that much opposition.
Is it possible to pass true economic reform in the face of the political situation in Brazil?
Because Brazil is a democracy, and because Brazil has institutions, these things have gotten to Brazil, and people have questioned. And of course, the justice has had complete freedom to act and go after things that were not in sync with what people would expect. So I think we have to overcome these, and I'm confident that we're able to overcome.
Dr. Levy, we like to end on an optimistic note whenever possible. What are the major opportunities then in Brazil? What is the best path forward for the country?
I think we have to take advantage that we're a big country. We are a country that really has no issues in terms of religion, of people. We are the real melting pot. We have people from all over the world working very closely, okay, and with no barriers whatsoever. This is tremendously valuable in the global economy. And also, as part of the diversity, we have a pretty good middle class with increasing skills and knowledge. So I think that also as part of these reforms and responding to this new period pause commodity price, I think a huge priority of Brazil has to be to reinforce its commitment in development of science, of technology. We have good schools, we have good institutions. Few countries would have emerging markets. We have like our labs for vaccines and for let's say biotechnology. We have, of course, the aircraft industry. So we have to focus and to get these things in place and done and available to the private sector, because the private sector is eager to have this infrastructure. We talked about infrastructure. It's not only roads, but also the scientific infrastructure, so that we can get our economy back in full throttle.
There you have it, the optimistic note. Dr. Levy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.